Well, Kevin, I wanted to take this time and personally welcome you to Aaron's Opinion. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. Now, I don't know if you have had the chance to really go over my content, listen to any of my episodes, or watch my YouTube videos, but I will start this interview like I would start any other by asking you a very simple and very effective question. Who is Kevin Lowe?
Ooh, that is an interesting question. And well, I would explain Kevin Lowe as I like to say an ordinary 30 something who's still trying to figure out where he fits into the world while trying to make a difference along the way. And part of that along the way has been my recent chapter of my life is of being a host of my own podcast. And all of this, of course, kind of amplified by the fact that I am completely blind.
All right, all right. Well, I'm also 30 years old. I was born blind with glaucoma, and I
Okay.
also have a congenital heart defect. I live in the universe, and I'm American. And basically, my story of how I got into podcasting is that my day job is a teacher. So I'm someone who talks all day, and I just love talking and educating people. And Kevin, I was listening to a lot of podcasts around the blindness community, and I noticed that although their content was great, they just were not open to having guests and open to my opinions about the world and society that we live in. So I kind of had a problem with that. And I said, you know what? Podcasters need to be open. So I created my own podcast where I can record my own voice. And over the past 2 or 3 years, it has grown into the product that Aaron's Opinion is today. So really, let's dig right into it then. How did you get into podcasting? What was your motivation? And why don't you highlight your podcast and some of the things that you've done? You've interviewed, both of us have interviewed incredible people around the universe, but you've interviewed some really incredible people. So why don't you dig into that for a bit and tell us about the whole history of your product?
Of course, of course. So I launched my podcast back May of 2020. So this was basically in the height of the pandemic.
Mine too.
And yep, and so I have been working since 2013 as a home-based travel agent. And of course, come 2020, the world kind of shut down. And I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason in this life, even the stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense. I believe that as you continue down your journey, it starts to make sense and comes together, and you can come to understand why. And for myself, this was so true last year when my travel agency really, as I explained it, kind of took a nosedive into the shallow end of the swimming pool. And though that opened the door for me to have all this downtime to pursue something that I'd been thinking of. And that was, I had been thinking like, man, I would love to start a YouTube channel. And so I started thinking about that and started, researching and even ordered some products off of Amazon. Well, quickly kind of realized, you know what, the whole YouTube thing, video it gets a little complicated for me. And so I was like, oh, you know what, I'll just go the route of maybe doing a podcast. And so this was really my first experience really with podcasts. I had just started listening to podcasts, and I was like, you know what, maybe that's what I need to do. And so that's what I did. I launched my podcast. It started out being called The Lowdown on Life and Travel, and it was basically tying in with my travel agency. And so that's what the most of my beginning episodes are pretty much all focused around travel. And then though, coming into, January 2021, I really, began to realize that, oh my gosh, like I really love this podcasting thing. As I always tell people, I'm like, this is way more fun than, canceling vacations. and, and so I really just began to love it. And that's when I rebranded the podcast to what it is today, which is The Lowdown with Kevin Lowe. And where I say that, I choose to shine light on the positive side of life by focusing on the incredible stories of ordinary people living out anything but ordinary lives. And so that has really just given me this amazing opportunity to meet some of the most incredible people, all over the world who, if it wasn't for this podcast, I'd never even known existed. And so, that's kind of where I am today I've built my podcast. Now it's become its own business and brand, and I'm starting to expand and just trying to see, again, just kind of where I can take this. And so, yeah, like you said, it's called, The Lowdown with Kevin Lowe. And basically, as I say, it's letting my audience get to see people the way that I do. And that's where we don't see them for what they look like, but see them for who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Amen. I totally understand where you're coming from. I think that our stories are basically the same. I mean, I didn't work as at home as a home travel agent because I just couldn't stomach canceling vacations. But, the truth of the matter is that I think our stories are basically the same, and that's a lot of what I do here at Aaron's Opinion. Is I say, my slogan, help one person today, help a million people tomorrow. It's really true, because if we only help one person at a time, we're literally helping thousands of people, if not millions, by creating appropriate content that truly serves to educate and help other people. And when you do that, when you create good content that helps others, that karma of creating helpful content will swing back and help you for sure. For sure. Yes. Well, so of course, I've traveled all over the world. I have to dig into some travel stories with you.
Of course.
But so what was your motivation to become an at-home travel agent? I think a lot of blind people around the world would want to do that job. Why don't you give us the lowdown on travel agent at home? Go right ahead.
Absolutely. So I went blind when I was 17 years old. And so Whoa. that was when I was a junior in high school.
Right. Now, of course, I have to interject here and just say, look, I apologize ahead of time, but philosophically, I cannot comprehend what it must be like to go blind as an older adult, because I was born blind. So there's a huge philosophical difference. But anyway, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. And so, so I went blind at 17, and that was in my junior year of high school. And we had found out that I had a brain tumor.
Oh.
And yeah, and the brain tumor that we found out, it wasn't cancerous, but it needed to be removed as soon as possible, because they literally gave me 6 months to live if this tumor was not removed. And so, but, as bad as that sounded, we were assured everything was going to be fine. They literally said I would be back to school in like 3 weeks. Everything was going to be perfect. And, at this time, I mean, I was driving, I had my own truck. I grew up riding 4-wheelers and dirt bikes and, all this different stuff. And so anyways, I went into surgery, and I'm not sure when this podcast and YouTube video and stuff will be released, but this October 28th is actually the 18th anniversary of my surgery. And so on that day, I went into surgery to have the brain tumor removed, which it was. My life was saved, but I awoke from surgery to be left completely blind. And so, everything that I ever kind of dreamed or even had the slightest thought that I might like to do after school as a career was kind of, taken away. And I really had to begin a process of, as I say, kind of learning to live a whole new life. I was even, when it comes to school and learning, I was a very visual learner, so I had to, basically relearn how to learn. And, and so everything in my world kind of changed. And fast forwarding, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do as a career. And I ended up taking part in a job readiness program that was offered by one of the blind services in our area. And it was actually offered by through the Center for the Visually Impaired. And so I did that job readiness program. And at the end of the program, they gave you the opportunity that they would set you up with an internship at a local business. And so through talking with the counselors and stuff there who did the program, two areas of interest I had were radio and travel. And so they actually literally got me set up with an internship at a local AM radio station and then another internship at a local travel agency. And, I always tell people that, I fell in love with the radio right off the bat. I mean, I worked 3 days a week. I went in for the morning show. It was the morning drive program. It was an AM talk radio. I sat in the studio with the guys and I found local news stories and got to talk on air. And oh my gosh, it was amazing. And but at the end of that internship, they weren't in a position to take on anybody. And so, it would just kind of went on about my way. Well, the travel agency internship kind of worked the same way. I loved it. I grew up traveling with my family. That's why, I kind of had this interest in it. And that is one thing that I discovered after going blind was that, I still love to travel because, I can't tell you how many times we would go on cruises and even still to this day that we've been on vacations. And it seems like most of the time it's happened when we've been on a cruise that somebody will come up to me or whomever I'm with and be like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing you're out on a trip, but why would you even go on a cruise? And that question always just cracks me up because I'm like, these people are so stuck in this visual world that they fail to recognize any of the other senses. And so that's what, when I got done with the internship at the travel agency, was kind of spinning my wheels, not knowing what to do. When then I found the route of becoming my own home-based business. And so I literally started my own travel agency, figured out how to do it. And I started doing that and designing trips based on the premise that, that the world is comprised of so much more than just what our eyes could see, and so designing trips that are, very, fully immersive and, very sensory and, all that. And so that's what got me into travel, and I loved it. I loved doing the travel agent stuff, but to be honest, I love traveling more than I love booking travel. So
Well, right there, when you said that you love traveling more than you love booking the trip, that shows me that you know how to be a travel agent because you've actually been on the ground and you've actually seen and experienced what it really means to travel.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And so, I mean, I think I completely relate to everything you're saying. Personally, I would have loved an internship in radio, but I didn't really know until I got into content creation that I am a broadcaster. I didn't really realize that until I started doing it. Quite frankly, if I had studied broadcasting, I wouldn't have ended up being a broadcaster. But
Yes.
I think the truth is that I think it's great that you had that opportunity to work in that station. So my next question is, so what do, and I mean, because blind people have heard of this and blind people are fascinated by it. So can you define some terms for me today? Can you tell me, so what is a travel agent and exactly what do you do? Is it like, how does it work? What does a travel agent do? And how do you go about, what are all the steps that you took to set up and establish your successful home business? So why don't you walk us through kind of the whole recipe here?
Of course. So I'll tell you, it's easy in a sense of getting set up. There's a thing that's called a host agency, and the host agency is kind of an umbrella, and you have all these home-based travel agents that fall under the umbrella. And because when you start booking travel, you get signed up with all the different suppliers, the different cruise companies, the hotels, all of that, as a travel agent. Well, there's a lot of different, licenses and different, certifications and stuff that you need. And so the easiest way to go about it is that you sign up under a host agency. And there's so many host agencies. If you literally go on Google and type in, best travel host agencies, you'll find sites that break them down and, and give you all the details. And then, it's literally just going the route of creating your own business. You truly it's, and that was one thing for myself is I grew up with parents who owned their own businesses. And so I always had this desire to be, an entrepreneur. And so, starting my own home-based travel agency, that it really did amazing things for me, because it gave me purpose, and it was something that I enjoyed, and it was something that not only just a job that I did, but something that I created that was mine. And so that was amazing for me, and I think it's amazing for a lot of people, and I think that's a lot of reason why anybody does it, whether they're blind or not. Is creating this own business. But with creating your own business, you're the one in charge of bringing in clients. You have to not only just be a travel agent, but you've got to become a marketer. Also, because if you're not adequately bringing in new clients, new leads every single day, you're not going to, do very well. And for myself, like I said, I started my agency in 2013, and, and I've loved it, and just, fell in love with it. And, started, booking amazing honeymoons and all different kinds of like bucket list, vacations for clients and stuff. But, like I said, last year when the pandemic hit, I literally was set up to have my best year ever as a travel agent. And literally overnight, all of it disappeared. Every vacation was canceled. And I was just left just kind of sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And like I said earlier, that's when it kind of gave me this focus of, to start the podcast, which, started out as just a hobby, as something to fill my time, while we were in quarantine, and to assist the travel agency. And then though, my podcast has kind of become, this new entrepreneurial journey of, building its brand again. And that's something that, I really enjoy, is the creative side of building a brand and building a company, and figuring it all out. And, two totally different industries, from travel to becoming, a content creator, but both of them, share so many similarities, and just, it's creating a business. And, like I said, if whether you're interested in becoming a travel agent or, whatever, there's so many resources. Once you start Googling and going on YouTube and stuff, that's what I do, is I just start researching.
Sure, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. So, what are some of, when it comes to planning a trip for someone? What are the steps that a travel agent takes to actually build and construct the journey?
Of course. So I feel as though, really, as a travel agent, the only step different between booking a trip as a travel agent versus booking a trip of your own, I feel, is the fact that, I'm, obviously doing it for somebody. So the what makes a good travel agent is a person who truly gets to know their clients. And so that's where, with any person who I've ever booked their vacation, I set up a free, consultation call where I get to know the person or couple or family, and, really getting to know what they like, what they, love, in addition to, where are they thinking about traveling? What's their budget? All of those kind of things. And so I feel like, beyond that point, it kind of comes down to really determining, in my opinion, what kind of experience are you looking for? Because there's so many amazing places in the world, and I almost feel like you have to kind of go broad spectrum and then narrow down. You got to start thinking first and foremost, kind of reality check. What is my budget? What am I willing to spend on this vacation? Because then that's gonna, narrow your focus a little bit. And versus, if you've got this massive budget, well then yeah, let's book you an overwater bungalow, in the Maldives versus, maybe it's, renting a cabin up in, the Smoky Mountains. And then like I said, it's just a big part of it to me is thinking beyond the visual, beyond like, oh, well, this place I hear is so pretty and beautiful. Well, that's awesome. There's a lot of really beautiful places in the world, but what do you like? Are you fine just sitting around looking out the window all day? Or do you want to get out and taste some amazing food? Do you want to go somewhere where it's safe for you to go mingle with the locals and get to know people, and that's what I always tell everybody when people ask me about trips and stuff. I always tell them that the most impactful vacation that I ever went on was actually with a group of travel agents who we went down to Jamaica together. And what was amazing to me about Jamaica was the people. The people of Jamaica is what, I just made me fall in love with that island. And, and so I think that's just the biggest thing with, a vacation. Like I said, whether you're a travel agent booking a trip for someone else or booking your own vacation, is just really getting down and spending the time to really think into what you really like. Because I think so many times, thanks to social media and stuff, we see that, oh, Susie, she went on this amazing vacation and she was just raving about how great this resort was. Or, oh, Uncle Fred, he loved this cruise. Well, yeah, maybe they loved it because it was specifically made, for them. Start thinking about, kind of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. So what has been your most, well, what is the most abnormal vacation that you offer? The most craziest, the most outlandish vacation that you have ever actually sent someone
on? Probably one. It was a couple living in Colorado, and it wasn't that it was anything like crazy, but I just cracked up at they wanted to do it was their honeymoon, a young couple living in Colorado, and they wanted to go to Costa Rica and the Florida Keys. Well, if you know anything about the globe, those two places are nowhere even close to one another. And so I remember thinking, like, this is totally ridiculous. But sure enough, that's what they did. They literally, I had them fly from, Colorado down to Costa Rica. They spent a week in Costa Rica, had them at this amazing, all-inclusive resort, had a, little beachfront bungalow that they stayed in, had an amazing time there. They then got on a flight, flew all the way to Miami, Florida. So, had to make a layover in Texas, made it to Florida. They got to Miami. They stayed in a hotel, and then they rented a convertible Ford Mustang and drove the Mustang down to Key West and stayed there before then driving back to Miami and flying home. And so I just remember thinking that one always just stands out, because I booked, some amazing trips for people to Iceland or people who've wanted to go over to, Southeast Asia and stuff. But that trip in particular just always stands out in my mind because I'm like, they basically combined two totally different vacations into one trip. So.
Yeah. No, that's funny. That's funny. I mean, it's, that sounds like two different trips.
Yeah, totally.
But it sounds like, though, probably if you're adventurous enough to go to Costa Rica, you wouldn't need to necessarily go to the Florida Keys. But
exactly.
But who knows? Probably it sounds like to me that they probably had some personal connections in the Florida Keys. Maybe there was a relative or something. That's what I would have thought. Because nothing personal, but no matter how much money you have, it wouldn't make sense to fly from Central America back,
No.
up into Florida. It sounds to me, if I had been booking that, I would have thought in the back of my mind, I would have thought, well, these people like have a relative or a friend in the Florida Keys that they want to be able to see on their trip, and the friend was too afraid to go to Costa Rica. That's
Lit-
probably what it was.
and literally, it was literally just the fact that those were two places they wanted to go to. And they said,
Right.
hey, we've got 2 weeks to travel. Let's just spend a week in one and a week in the other.
You can do
And
it.
I'm like, okay. So yeah, so
Cool.
that was pretty funny.
Cool, cool. Yeah, yeah. And what about have you ever had someone who's wanted to go to like Antarctica or like the Arctic or Greenland or places like that?
I have not. I have not. I've never done anything quite that exotic. I think the most exotic has been Iceland. So
Iceland. But actually the more exotic one is Greenland.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Yes. But I have never had anyone go to Greenland or Antarctica or anywhere like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it could be. So yeah, so what if someone comes to your travel agency and they say, "Well, Mr. Lowe, I really seriously, I'm really not joking. Let's say that, Mr. Smith comes to you and he says, Mr. Lowe, I really do want to go to Antarctica. I don't see it on your website, but have you ever just basically conjured up or tailored a trip for someone like that and figured it out? Or is that a little bit, does it not really work like that? Like how would that work?
Of course. So the awesome thing about the travel agent industry is I've been in the industry for so long that you make amazing connections. And so you learn that, because there's a lot of people who they get into the business and they feel like, oh, well, I've never traveled there. I've never booked a trip there. So how I can't do that. Well, if you go into it with that mentality, then you're never going to really book a vacation. And so, a big part about being a travel agent is not only researching, but relying on your supplier partners. And so it's finding one of your supplier partners who specializes in trips to Antarctica, and you getting on the phone with them and you being like, hey, listen, I've got this couple looking at going here. I've never booked a trip here. I want to book through you. Can you help me put together, an amazing trip for them? So that's how I've gone about that. Yes.
Right, right. I see. I see. That's really cool. That's really cool. All right, excellent.
Yes.
I'll circle back to that in a minute, but back to the broadcasting podcast side. So who have been some of your most unexpected and interesting guests that you have interviewed from all over the world? I mean, I too have interviewed people on all the continents, but what about you? Who have been some of your characters that you've interviewed?
Yeah. So I think one of the cool guests who, I think a lot of people will recognize his name that I just had on the podcast was Eric Weinmayer. Noted as, the first blind person to ever summit Mount
Yeah.
Everest. Yeah. So he was a really amazing person to talk to. So that was pretty cool. And that was just, that episode is fresh in my mind just because, that just came out, I think last week, at the time of this recording. And, but other than that, oh my goodness, one was an amazing interview I did with a lady who lives in Bali. And so that was amazing. She's like, whatever it was, like, I'm trying to think of our time difference. I think she was like 12 hours ahead of me because
That
I
sounds
remember
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I was set up in my recording studio at like 6 a.m. on like a Saturday morning and recorded the interview with her.
See
And
what
it
I
was,
do. See what I do with the people in that time zone is I make them get up early in the morning.
yeah, yes. Well, thankfully in that situation, I'm a morning person.
Right.
And so that worked good. But now the people who the time zone's like different and they're like, oh, and it's like me having to do it after, 6 o'clock in the evening. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. So
Actually, funny you mention it. I record most of my content, as I said, at 2000 New York at 8 p.m. at night. So
okay.
I'm actually more of an evening person, but I
Okay.
really, what really turned me on, what really motivated me to talk to you was I saw your beautiful website and your willingness to talk to me. So when you said,
Yes.
9 o'clock, I was like, oh, let's just get him on here as quickly as possible. He's really motivated. And
Yes.
so that's something that us podcasters, we can tell who's motivated. We can secretly tell. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
But yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, so the lady in Bali, that was, just a phenomenal interview. She had an amazing story, and so that was, incredible. I'm trying to think of some others that, recently that I've done. I've interviewed one lady who, incredible story again, is she became a quadriplegic, and it was she grew up in this amazing childhood where her and her parents, they traveled all over the world. They did like these crazy like backpacking adventures in like the Australian outback, all this stuff, and she was in her middle 20s living in the Bahamas, and she literally was just out one day on the dock with friends and dove off the dock and misjudged how deep the water was.
Happens to
Hit
a
her.
lot of people. A lot of people
Yeah.
do that.
Yep. And she became a C6 quadriplegic. And but I mean, the most incredible person I've ever had the chance to meet, her spirit. I remember interviewing her, and I remember saying to her, I'm like, now listen, I'm like, are you seriously this positive and upbeat? And and she is. That's just her spirit, and that's what, whether it's somebody who's has lived in like a faraway place like Bali, or somebody, who lives, right, in the same, city as I do. It's just, as I say, everybody has a story in life, and so many people, those stories, they just kind of get buried away. And that's what I think is amazing about being able to get on a podcast and have just like an amazing conversation with somebody, is to uncover these stories and share them, for the world to hear and benefit from.
Right. And the other thing that really amazes me is the more stories I tell and help to be told, then I really realize how many people I'm helping. A lot of people, I've had some guests on this podcast who have had a hard life. And, sometimes people just need to sit down and talk to you. And that can be a really great conversation to have, because other people also feel the need to have those types of conversations.
Exactly.
So, that's really what it's all, what it's about. For me, is to have the privilege of helping others to share their stories that otherwise probably wouldn't be able to share, because so many podcasts are just not approachable and not open.
Yep.
And so that's why it's really important to be receptive to guests and to try to give people chances. Now, I've had guests that don't work out occasionally, or they just get nervous and disappear. That happens to some extent. But I have found that most of the people who come to Aaron's Opinion not only deserve to be here, but want to be here. And you, over time, as a podcast, you attract the right guests.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. So since you name dropped, which I don't always name drop myself, but I'm sure he probably wouldn't mind. So what, I mean, you should say, well, Aaron, just go listen to the episode. But I'm going to say, what was something you learned from having the privilege of speaking with Eric Weimer?
Something that I thought was pretty cool, is, when I went blind, so I went blind in 2003, and apparently Eric summited Mount Everest in 2001. And, for a long time, I hated this new life of being blind. I wanted nothing to do with it. And literally everything that I learned, even when I started learning Braille and learned how to use the computer with talking software, all of it was me just buying time, because, I, in my mind, it was that, this isn't permanent. I'm going to see again. And I can remember during this time, started hearing the name of Eric Weimer. And because, like I said, just 2 years earlier, he had summited Mount Everest. And I started hearing this name. And for myself, I was just like, I viewed him in I guess like a more negative light, because he kind of like that name of Eric Weimer, without even knowing who he was, just that name represented this blind life that I hated. And it wasn't until I read Eric's book about kayaking the Grand Canyon a few years ago. And through his book, through that book, I realized, wow, I'm like, I love the book. I love the whole story. And it started making me realize, wow, maybe he's not, why did I have this negative orientation about him? And so, when I got to have Eric on my podcast, that was for myself the biggest takeaway, is the fact that he's painted and people revere him as, oh, Eric Weimer, the first blind guy to summit Mount Everest, almost like this blind superhero. And the fact of the matter is, he's just a normal guy. He's just like you or me, and it's just the fact that he has an issue being able to see. And so that for myself was the biggest takeaway, and stuff was the fact that he's just a normal person.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a really important aspect to express, that it's important not to basically, and I mean, I am not saying this is the case. This is not the case for Eric Weimer, but it's important to say that it's important not to, disability porn people, and say, well, we should celebrate them just because they're blind or just because of a disability. That's not really a reason. Quite frankly, lots of people summit Mount Everest, and the only reason why it attracted so much attention is because Eric is blind, right? So
exactly.
The point is, I mean, I guess it's hard for me to relate to it, because I was just kind of brought up in an environment where we just believe, well, doing things just because you're blind is not impressive, or doing things just because you're blind is not something to be celebrated. That's life. So, but I think it is interesting, but I don't know. I wonder if you have any particular opinion on that.
I not really, I guess.
That's fine.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
yeah.
Don't worry. Yeah. I just think it's important not to fixate too much on disability. When
No,
you look
yeah,
at an accomplishment.
of course. Yeah,
Right.
no, I agree with you. And I feel like, though, the fact of the matter is that, and I feel like it maybe even is different, like you talked about earlier, the difference of being born blind versus going blind later in life
Mm-hmm.
is so do you have no sight at all?
Well, in my case, I have some usable vision, but I tell people, I tell students I cannot see well enough to, let's say, like drive a car.
Yes,
So, like that.
exactly. Okay, so I was just asking because it's kind of like, that's the world you've known, and so you've grown up, you've not known anything different, and so you've learned to adapt, and that is your normal. Where like somebody like myself, who's maybe become blind later in life, as I often joke, that now I've actually been blind longer than I had been able to see. Yeah, I still consider this a new life,
Mm.
because vision is so strong, and it played such a big role, in those first 17 years of my life. And so I feel like that maybe is where like a difference kind of can come into play, with that of, not even harping on the fact of like, like, it's amazing because you're disabled, but more just the fact of celebrating the fact that you've been able to break down that barrier of that disability to achieve whatever that goal is.
Right. Sure.
That's
So,
kind of what I'm thinking.
okay. So once, so as far as your own travel, what are some trips that you're planning, for yourself in the near future?
Yeah, so I'm actually getting ready. We have actually getting ready to go up to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Tennessee area. And
Ah,
yeah, so I haven't been up there since I was a little kid. And so we actually have rented a cabin up there in the mountains. And that will be, in the fall. And so hopefully get some cool weather
yeah,
and just be able to really relax
and
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 have a nice
and
time.
hopefully, let me ask you a very specific question. Do you have any pets?
I do.
What do you have? I think I already know, but what do you have?
I have a little dog named Sophia.
Oh,
She will be staying at home with the
do you
grandparents.
know why I asked about pets?
Why?
Because, as you know, Pigeon Forge is the parrot capital.
Oh,
You don't know?
really? No.
You don't know.
What do you even mean the parrot capital?
Well, I'll tell you. There's a place called Parrot Mountain in Garden of Eden, one of the largest parrot sanctuaries and parrot zoos and parrot stores in the entire United States, if not the world. So they have a whole sanctuary of parrots that you can like play with and pet and hang out with. And then they have a shop where you can buy baby birds and all of the supplies and everything like that to get yourself into the parrot hobby. So Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, that's the parrot capital. I've actually been there. I've been there, man, and I have a picture. I have a picture to prove it. So I don't even have to lie about it. I have a picture to prove it. It's in a frame with me holding some parrots.
Well, considering the fact that I'm absolutely terrified of things like that, I went one time as a kid to some type of bird aviary, and that was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. So I don't think I'm going to be visiting this parrot sanctuary.
And I'm very proud to say that I went into the cage with one of the bird species called a lorikeet, a rainbow lorikeet from Australia, and they drink nectar. So I was holding a cup of nectar, and the flock of lorikeets landed on me, and
Oh
like,
my gosh.
yes, so soothing.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know why you're going to Pigeon Forge then. Nothing is good. You are wasting away your time if you don't go. What a waste of a trip. I mean, you'd be better off taking a 2 week vacation to Costa Rica and the Florida Keys. Good
Yes.
grief. I mean, oh my
That
god.
is so funny.
Oh my,
So
well, you're going
funny.
all the way to Pigeon Forge, and you're so you have a parrot phobia. You're a parrot phobe, I guess. You're afraid of
Yeah.
parrots.
Yeah. Birds, I guess. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
God, that's just awful. I don't know how you live your life. I mean, are you blind or something? Because you can't live your whole life being afraid of parrots. Come on. Well, so what are you gonna
That's
do? What are you gonna do in Pigeon Forge? Well, nothing. There's nothing to do except go to the parrots. I will tell you, outside of Parrot Mountain, just in case someone else in your family wants to go, I know that you don't want to go to it, and that's fine. You probably have other ethical issues with it, and it's probably a lot of different reasons. But just ask me after the recording, ask me in the future to send you the website because for other family members, it really is the best thing of Pigeon Forge. I went there. It's a bit of a long story. I live with my parents and my brother, and my brother's girlfriend, and my. Of course, I want to have when I have my own place, I want to have my own bird, but my parents don't really agree with that. Well, what happened was, boy, I didn't expect us to get on this kick. You should have never said Pigeon Forge. Oh, what a mistake! God, what a rookie mistake that was. So basically, what was going on was I was asking my father, hey, when can I ever have a bird? And then I found out about this place online, Parrot Mountain. He said, well, okay, honestly, I don't really agree with it, but I'll still take you out there, and we can still have a vacation for something to do. So this past May, we basically drove for 8 hours, and we drove out to Pigeon Forge, and we stayed in a very nice hotel. And we went on a hike, and we went to the parrot place for one day. I will tell you. I mean, have you ever been to Pigeon Forge before, or is it going to be your first time?
I did as a kid.
Okay, well, so no, that doesn't really count. So, I mean, outside of Parrot Mountain, I got to tell you, nothing against Pigeon Forge, but it's just kind of a weird little town. I mean, They have some like kiddie stuff, like an amusement park area, some stores, that sell, knickknacks and things like that. But
That's so
and there's some
funny.
and there's some great restaurants there. There really is. I'm not going to name drop them because it's just not cool. But they do have. Just connect with me later, and I'll say, I'll book. You know what? I will automatically, within the next 3.5 hours, I will automatically become your personal travel agent. Not only not not only will I set you up with a great restaurant, but I will require a tour of Parrot Mountain and Garden of Eden. I mean,
Okay.
you're just killing me, bro. You're just
Okay.
killing me. I mean, come on, come on.
That's so
But
funny.
I do hope that you do some great hiking. The other thing is, what if someone came to you and said, and it's something that in real life now, it's something that I might say. What if someone came to you and said, "Well, Mr. Lowe, can you plan a trip for me, a vacation where I do some serious hiking?" And what I mean by serious hiking is people who want to hike from point to point for several days. In other words, have you ever planned a backpacking trip for someone and set it up for them?
I have not. No. Nope.
because
I
that's
have
kind
never
of
done that.
because that's kind of complicated. It's not just about putting the backpack on your back and setting off. You have to know where is an appropriate place to start, where are you allowed to walk, where are you allowed to go when you're on the trails. That's kind of complicated. So,
Yes. Yeah. 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 No, I've never done anything like that.
I see. I see. I see. Well, are you going to do some hikes in the Smoky Mountains? Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is the plan. I mean, to be quite honest, we don't really have any set agenda. Our biggest thing is just to really just relax, and then of course, we have some different places in mind. Between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely some hiking, and so we're just the kind of the plan is once we get there, just
Yeah.
kind of figure out where we want to be and
Well,
just
you
kind
want
of
to
use it
go.
as.
Okay. Well, you want to let me give you the addresses. So you want to make sure you want to put in the address of Paramount, and you're going to go there. Apart from that, okay. And I will tell you, you mentioned Gatlinburg. Well, let me. This is another interesting, blindness perspective thing. Knowing the distance, I'll tell you. My father and I, when we were in Pigeon Forge, we stopped. I don't know. We stopped at some liquor store to buy beer or something, and I said, "What about that other place that we keep hearing about?" Because over the GPS, the GPS person was saying, such and such road to Gatlinburg. We kept on hearing it, and we were trying to figure out, well, where's Gatlinburg? And we looked it up. So Gatlinburg is about 30 to 45 minutes away from Pigeon Forge.
Yes.
So it's two. Again, it's important to know two totally different places. Um,
Yes.
I doubt that there's much in Gatlinburg. I wouldn't really know. Um, but anyway, that's incredibly fascinating. All of that. I wish you a very very pleasant journey there, and I would like to learn more about the various um, the various hikes that you do end up doing and things like that. And so, um, and the other thing that really impresses me about your podcast and your podcasting skills is that you have a beautiful website. And that's something I was going to actually ask you off the air, but I don't really see any problem with asking you about that. So what if Aaron's opinion came to you and said, "Kevin, I love what you're doing, but what can you tell me about setting up a specific podcast website?" Well, what can you tell me about that?
Oh my goodness. I've through designing multiple different websites all along my travel agency journey. I learned a lot about different websites and designed a bunch of different websites. But my biggest thing is just finding a really amazing web designer. And so I mean, my website, I provide my web designer who I found with kind of the layout, all the wording, and then really kind of rely on her design, technique to put it together. So I think that's the biggest thing is go out and hire a web designer and just trying to take a look at other websites, for whatever type of website you're building for, whether it's a podcast, a travel agency, whatever it is, looking at other websites, getting an idea, and and kind of going from there. So it's definitely, the website is literally, it's one of those things that it's a constant project. I mean, I'm constantly updating my website. And so it's definitely not just like a one and done deal. That's for certain.
Okay. So do you design websites for other people?
No, I don't.
Ah, maybe that's something you can work towards. I think that would be a very good product to be able to offer people, web design.
Yes.
Well,
Well, thank you.
so what goes into the design of a podcast website? I mean, really kind of break it down and break down the engineering for me. What do you think?
So I think first and foremost, I feel as though, besides for having a place for people to come to find your podcast, I think it's a place that really gives you the opportunity to get to showcase you as the podcast host as well as the podcast as a brand. And so I feel like that's a big part of just having, for me, I'm a big fan of very clean, simple websites. I'm not a big fan of so many that just put so much stuff on them. And so I'm big into just a clean design. And I feel like for a podcast, it's a podcast is the podcast host. And so I feel like it needs to showcase you and be sure that you as the podcast host are front and center on the website, and that you let your personality kind of shine through. I think it kind of comes back to the whole branding part of any company you build, is of figuring out what your brand voice is, and letting that come through, as well. And I feel like for anybody looking at starting any type of business, creating any type of website, an amazing resource I recommend to anybody is building a story brand, which is a whole formula by Donald Miller. He has a book, he has a podcast, and it's a whole different way of looking at marketing and building a website and sales pages. And so that's an amazing resource. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Not to mention, I would ask you probably off air, but so do you personally know a web developer who builds websites?
I do. Yes.
Yes.
But I'll be honest,
Sure.
the where I found my web designer, and where because I've gone through multiple web designers, and I feel like it's finding somebody who's a good fit for you. But as I use the different freelancer sites that are out there, one that I use that I think's been around for a long time is however you pronounce it, Fiverr.
Fiverr. It's Fiverr. Yeah.
Fiverr. And so that's where I use for my graphic designer, for my where I find my web designer, podcast editor, and I always recommend anybody to search on those, and I always say there's kind of it's a lot of work. You don't just go on there and it's like a one and done deal. Sometimes you get lucky and it's the first person you try is awesome, and other times you have to go through a couple, but give them little projects to work on and see
Yeah.
if it's a good fit.
Right, but I don't,
So
I don't have to go. I don't have to go through all that stress, and I don't have to sweat that much because I'll ask you off air. So who do you use, and then you'll tell me, and then it'll be easy for me.
that's right. Perfect.
See, so if there's a trick to this equation here. If you know the right people, it's very easy. You have to surround yourself with the right people. So yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say for podcast websites, I have to give it up to Podpage also, because I have used them before the website that I have now,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
there's
they're
more like a template, but they're amazing.
I have a pod page.
Okay, do you? Yeah, they're so awesome.
Yeah, love it. I love it. I love my pod page. Um, I mean, I don't think you can actually answer this. This is a really technical question. Is it possible? I don't even know if this question is somewhat nonsensical, but is it possible to give a web designer a website that you already kind of have, and then allow the web designer to not mimic it, not plagiarize it, but like give it a facelift, like kind of redesign it with certain other features, or is that just not even how websites work? If that makes sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, because I've done that in the past with my travel agency and stuff. where, I've had like a website and then have hired somebody to come in and, provide them with edits that I want made. If that's kind of, what you're after.
Yeah. You know what? Let's continue. Obviously, you haven't gotten rid of me this easily. So let's obviously talk later today or another time about this project. But I have a specific goal that I would need a little bit of help with, but I think it would help both of us out in the end. So yeah, Podpage is just really cool. Even alone, if you don't do anything with it, it's a great resource to just keep track of your episodes and just to archive things that you've done. It's just great. Even for that alone, it's worth doing it just to have an archive of things. So yeah, definitely. Well, Kevin Lowe, whew, I gotta tell you, I just love your voice. I absolutely, love talking to you today. You really, every guest, I don't know what it is, but it must be the magic of podcasting. But every guest that I have just keeps getting better and better and more magical by the day. And I cannot thank you enough for joining me, to kick off your work week. Of course, I work every day, so every day is a work day. But we know what we mean. It's so good that you took some time out of your Monday morning, because I know that you were on the Parrot Mountain website looking at parrots before I called. So I'm very sorry to distract your parrot viewing, but actually, what I wanted to say is, so I'm sure that you have a lot of questions for me. So what are some of your questions? And I always like to wrap it up by saying, well, actually. So if somebody wants to book a trip with you, let's give yourself some plugs. So where can someone find you and contact you after this show today?
Absolutely. So my website for the travel agency is betterdaystravel.com. And so that basically has all the contact
That's
information.
why, you know what, on my Google Voice number, on my professional number, that's why it said Better Days Travel. I was wondering what that was.
Yep. So that is the travel agency. So okay. Yes.
All right. You know what? I tell you what. If you can send me the link for the link that you want in the description, I include one link in the abstract. So if you can send that over, that would be a really good. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's so good. And if you can ask me only one question to really make me sweat, to see if I'm really worth my salt as a podcaster, what do you really want to ask Aaron Richmond from Aaron's Opinion?
Oh, let's see. What is the what is I guess like the one question or process that you use when trying to pitch a guest to come on your podcast?
I show them that I'm a great podcast that helps one person today and a million tomorrow. And the fact is that the karma of having good guests coming to your podcast attracts other good guests. So it's not so much about, for me, that's an interesting point to bring up. It's not so much about pitching the podcast. I don't do that. I don't sweat even one drop of sweat to pitch to someone to come on. I don't pitch, because the reason I don't is because if I have to pitch, nothing personal, that guest probably, maybe my podcast is not a good fit for them. There's a lot of podcasts out there that are not always appropriate for all guests or all listeners for a variety of reasons. So I think it's important to capitalize on your product and surrounding yourself with other people who agree with you and who see that what you're doing is the right thing to do. And that truly is the trick. That's the trick in podcasting, is figuring it out. It takes several years of doing it before you figure out who those people are, but that in essence is the trick. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
Yes. Excellent. Do you have any parting words of wisdom before?
Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing that I would say is, for anybody listening today is, we all have stuff going on in our lives. We all face challenges, and though the most important thing is for all of us to remember to keep moving forward, to keep going, and whatever your challenge is to realize that you can get through it, you can keep moving forward, and that's kind of my biggest thing, is just trying to remind people to focus on the positive and, to keep moving forward in life.
Perfect. Perfect. Could not agree more. Well, everybody, click the link in the description to learn more about Kevin. And Kevin, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me today. I tremendously enjoyed your voice and your personality that you plugged into this episode today, man. So good, so good. And of course, it really wouldn't be an episode. I usually say this in the outro, but I'll say it here. Thanks so much, everybody. Help one person today. Help a million people tomorrow. And Kevin, if nothing else, please, please, please enjoy the parrots. Enjoy the parrots in Pigeon Forge. All right?
Sounds good.